The sound of her heels hitting the hallway floor should have warned me. Sharp. Frantic. Nothing like the measured, calculating stride Clarissa Vale usually employed when moving through Eclipse Technologies' executive wing. But I was deep in a supplier audit when my office door flew open, actually flew, the handle cracking against the wall, and there she stood. Our CEO. The woman who'd built this company from venture capital scraps into a billion-dollar enterprise. Gasping. Hair askew. Eyes wild with something I'd never seen in her before. Fear. Why did the oversight committee intervene? Her voice cracked on the last word. Liv, what did you do? I looked up from my laptop slowly. Let the silence stretch. Let her feel every second of it. I stayed silent, I said. Just like you told me to. 2 days. That's how long it took for everything she'd built to start crumbling. 2 days since she'd reassigned my documentation review with those words that still burned in my chest, "You're too ethical for the shortcuts we need." She'd scoffed when she said it. Actually scoffed, as if integrity was something quaint and outdated, like a rotary phone or a typewriter. I should start at the beginning. You need to understand how we got here, why my hands are trembling as I'm telling you this, why I can still taste the bile that rose in my throat when I first read those files. 3 weeks ago, Clarissa called me into her corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, where you could see the harbor glittering in the distance on clear days. The one with that absurd Italian marble desk and the leather chairs that cost $8,000 each. The one that cost more to furnish than most people's homes. She wanted me to conduct an expedited review of our clinical trial documentation for the NeuralSync implant. 6 months of testing data. Thousands of pages spanning 3 clinical sites across 2 countries. Eclipse Technologies' flagship product, the device that would revolutionize neurological treatment, according to our marketing department's glossy brochures and carefully staged promotional videos. I'd been the director of compliance for 4 years. My job was simple: make sure we followed the rules. Make sure we didn't cut corners. Make sure that when we said something was safe, it actually was safe. How expedited? I asked. 2 weeks. Maybe less. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, never did when we talked about timelines and deliverables. Her fingers drummed against the armrest, a nervous tic I'd noticed appearing more frequently over the past few months. We're accelerating the FDA submission timeline. The board wants this approved before Q3. Our investors are getting antsy. Neuropath just announced their Series C funding round, and the vultures are circling. 2 weeks to review 6 months of clinical data. My stomach clenched. I'd done expedited reviews before, but nothing this compressed. Nothing with stakes this high. The NeuralSync implant represented 70% of Eclipse Technologies' projected revenue for the next 5 years. Everything rode on this approval. Clarissa, that's not realistic. A proper review takes at least 6 weeks, minimum. We're talking about brain implants. Direct neural interface. The margin for error is. I'm not asking for proper, Liv. I'm asking for fast. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. We have competition breathing down our necks. Neuropath is 6 months behind us, but they're cutting their own corners. If we don't move now, we lose first mover advantage. We lose everything. I should have walked away then. Should have resigned. Should have done 1,000 things differently. But I nodded. I took the files. I went back to my office and started reading. Do you know what it's like to discover something terrible in the middle of the night? The office was empty, just the hum of the HVAC system and the distant whir of the server room down the hall. My desk lamp cast a small circle of light in the otherwise dark compliance department. I was on page 347, drinking my 4th cup of coffee that had long gone cold, when I found the first discrepancy. A patient identifier that didn't match between the adverse event log and the treatment schedule. Patient P1847. Small. Could be a clerical error, a simple transposition of numbers. But it nagged at me the way a loose thread nags at your consciousness until you have to pull it. I kept digging. By sunrise, I'd found 12 more inconsistencies. Patient identifiers that didn't align. Dates that shifted between documents. Severity ratings that mysteriously changed from serious to moderate without explanation or updated physician notes. By the end of that day, fueled by adrenaline and mounting dread, I'd uncovered a pattern that made my blood run cold. Adverse events, seizures that lasted up to 40 minutes, memory loss spanning entire weeks of a patient's life, severe headaches requiring emergency room visits, documented in the raw clinical notes but somehow absent from the summary reports that would go to the FDA. Not all of them. Just enough to shift the safety profile from concerning to acceptable. Just enough to make the difference between approval and rejection. Someone had scrubbed the data. Someone had made this device look safer than it was. I barely slept that night. Kept seeing the patient codes in my mind, scrolling past my closed eyelids like ticker tape. P1847. P2103. P2456. P3089. P3142. Numbers that represented real people. Real suffering that had been erased from the official record with a few keystrokes and strategic omissions. People who'd trusted Eclipse Technologies with the most delicate, most vital part of their bodies. People who'd signed consent forms believing they were participating in ethical research. The next morning, I went straight to Clarissa's office. Didn't schedule a meeting. Didn't send an email. Just walked in while she was on a call and waited until she hung up. "We have a problem," I said. She looked at me with those sharp blue eyes. "Define problem." I laid out everything. The missing adverse events. The discrepancies. The clear signs of data manipulation. I spoke quickly, professionally, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. "Tobias? Come to my office. Now." Tobias Fletcher. Our Chief Technology Officer. The genius behind NeuralSync's design, the man whose face graced the cover of 3 different tech magazines last year alone. He arrived within minutes, all confident swagger and expensive suit, Armani, if I wasn't mistaken, paired with Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Tell him what you told me," Clarissa said. So I did. Again. Watching his face carefully this time. Watching for surprise, concern, alarm. Anything. What I saw instead was annoyance. "These are known issues," he said dismissively. "We've already addressed them with the oversight physician. The adverse events you're referring to were determined to be unrelated to the device. Patient pre-existing conditions. Environmental factors. The summary reports reflect the corrected analysis." Corrected analysis? I felt heat rising in my chest. Who made that determination? Dr. Whitmore. Our lead clinical investigator. And where's his documentation? Where's the justification for excluding these events? Tobias exchanged a glance with Clarissa. Something passed between them. Something that made my spine straighten. "Liv," Clarissa said carefully, "I appreciate your thoroughness. But you're looking at this through a compliance lens without understanding the clinical nuances. Tobias and Dr. Whitmore have decades of combined experience." "I'm looking at this through a regulatory lens," I interrupted. "Which is literally my job. The FDA will tear this apart. If we submit documentation with unexplained discrepancies, then we'll explain them." Her voice hardened. "We'll provide the clinical justification. We'll walk them through every decision. But we are not delaying the submission." The room felt smaller suddenly. Colder. "I need to see Dr. Whitmore's analysis," I said. "I need to verify." "No." Clarissa stood up. "What you need to do is complete the documentation review and sign off on it. That's what you need to do." My heart hammered against my ribs. I can't sign off on something that might be falsified. The word hung in the air between us. Falsified. Clarissa's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of her desk. "Be very careful about the accusations you're making, Liv. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm stating facts. There are discrepancies that require investigation before nothing." She moved around the desk, closer to me. "Let me be clear about something. Eclipse Technologies has invested 8 years and $400 million into NeuralSync. We have investors expecting returns. We have patients waiting for treatment. We have employees whose livelihoods depend on this product's success. Your job is to facilitate that success, not obstruct it. My job is to ensure we're following the law. Your job is whatever I say it is. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tobias shifted uncomfortably. Clarissa's jaw was set, her eyes locked on mine. I should have backed down. Should have nodded and walked away and started looking for another job. Should have been smart about it. Instead, I said, then I guess we have a fundamental disagreement about what compliance means. Clarissa smiled. It was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. You're reassigned. Effective immediately. Tobias will oversee the documentation review going forward. You can't. I absolutely can. You're too ethical for the shortcuts we need, Liv. She scoffed, actually scoffed, as she said it. Sometimes progress requires flexibility. You don't have it. I left her office in a daze. Walked past my colleagues without seeing them. Sat at my desk staring at my computer screen while my career disintegrated around me. Too ethical. As if ethics were optional. As if the rules we followed were suggestions rather than safeguards built on decades of tragic mistakes. That's when something hardened inside me. Something cold and determined and utterly clear about what needed to happen next. I'd spent 4 years believing in the mission. Believing we were different. Believing that Eclipse Technologies represented the best of what medical innovation could be, rigorous science in service of human health. If Clarissa wanted to silence me internally, fine. But there were other avenues. Other channels. Other people who would care that Eclipse Technologies was about to submit potentially falsified clinical trial data to the FDA. People whose job was to protect patients, not shareholders. I spent that afternoon making copies. Quietly. Carefully. Locked my office door and closed the blinds. Downloaded the files to an encrypted drive I'd purchased with cash at an electronics store 3 blocks away. Every discrepancy, every missing adverse event, every piece of evidence that something was deeply wrong with NeuralSync's safety profile. Raw clinical notes. Summary reports. Email chains between Tobias and Dr. Whitmore. Internal memos discussing data optimization strategies. Everything. Then I went home and stared at my ceiling for hours, wrestling with what I was about to do. My cat, Murphy, curled up on my chest, purring obliviously while I contemplated career suicide. This wasn't just whistleblowing. This was career suicide. Industry blacklisting. Legal warfare that could drain my savings and drag on for years. Clarissa Vale didn't get to where she was by letting threats survive. She had lawyers on retainer who specialized in crushing people like me. Non-disclosure agreements with teeth. Resources I couldn't begin to match. But those patient codes kept running through my mind. P1847. P2103. P2456. Real people who'd suffered. Real suffering that had been erased. What kind of person would I be if I stayed silent? The Medical Device Oversight Committee operates independently from the FDA, but it has teeth. Real teeth. It can launch investigations that freeze companies in their tracks. It can halt trials. It can recommend enforcement actions that the FDA takes very seriously. It can subpoena documents and compel testimony. And most importantly, it can't be bought or intimidated the way internal review boards sometimes can. I knew someone on the committee. Dr. Lydia Okonkwo. We'd met at a compliance conference 3 years ago in Chicago, stayed in touch professionally through occasional emails and industry events. She was brilliant, uncompromising, and, most importantly, incorruptible. The kind of person who'd walked away from a lucrative consulting position because a pharmaceutical company wanted her to rubber stamp questionable research. The kind of person who actually meant it when she talked about patient safety being paramount. I sent her an encrypted email at midnight from a coffee shop 3 miles from my apartment, using a burner laptop I'd bought secondhand. No identifying information in the message itself. No direct accusations that could be traced back. Just a simple question: if someone had evidence of potential data manipulation in an ongoing clinical trial, what would be the proper channel for reporting it? She responded within an hour. Direct submission to the Oversight Committee. Anonymous if necessary. We take such reports very seriously. I attached the files. All of them. Hundreds of pages compressed into encrypted archives. Wrote a detailed summary of what I'd found, complete with timeline, patient codes, and cross-references. Laid out the pattern of discrepancies. Explained the potential harm if NeuralSync received approval based on manipulated data. Then I hovered my cursor over the send button for 10 minutes, my finger trembling above the trackpad, thinking about everything I was about to set in motion. This was it. The point of no return. I clicked send. Then I went to work the next morning like nothing had happened. Put on my usual charcoal blazer and pressed slacks. Smiled at my colleagues in the elevator. Attended meetings about quality control procedures and regulatory compliance training schedules. Acted like a good soldier who'd been reassigned to a less critical project and was making peace with the demotion. Tobias avoided me in the hallways, suddenly finding his phone fascinating whenever we crossed paths. Clarissa didn't acknowledge my existence when we passed in the executive wing, looking through me as if I'd become invisible. I was a ghost in my own company. But I wasn't idle. I kept my ears open. Listened to hallway conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked past. Watched the executive wing carefully through the glass walls of my office. Something was happening. Something that made Tobias and Clarissa have increasingly frequent closed-door meetings, their faces grim and tense through the frosted glass. Something that made our chief legal officer start spending entire days at headquarters instead of his usual remote schedule. Then, yesterday morning, everything exploded. The oversight committee didn't just review my submission. They launched a full investigation. Showed up at Eclipse Technologies unannounced at 8:30 on a Tuesday morning with legal authority to seize records and interview staff. The kind of intervention that only happens when they believe there's serious regulatory malfeasance. The kind that involves federal marshals and cardboard boxes and hard drives being carried out in evidence bags. I heard about it through the office gossip chain before any official announcement. Karen from accounting sent a group text to half the department. Watched from my window as serious-looking people in dark suits and federal badges entered the building carrying document boxes and tablet computers and equipment cases. Watched as security began cordoning off entire floors. Watched as my colleagues' faces shifted from confusion to understanding to fear. My phone stayed silent all day. No summons to Clarissa's office. No email from HR with urgent meeting requests. Nothing but the normal flow of routine messages about parking passes and software updates and someone's retirement party next week. It was the quiet before the storm. Which brings us back to this moment. Clarissa standing in my doorway, disheveled and desperate, demanding to know why the oversight committee intervened. I stayed silent, I repeat. Just like you told me to. She steps into my office, closes the door behind her. Her hands are shaking. Don't play games with me, Liv. This is catastrophic. Do you understand what you've done? The investigation alone will tank our FDA submission timeline by at least 18 months. Our stock price has already dropped 6% in pre-market trading. The board is in emergency session right now, and 3 members are demanding my resignation. We have investors threatening to pull funding. Our entire Series D round is in jeopardy. Partners are suspending contracts. Hospitals that were ready to place orders are backing away. Good. The word stops her cold. Good, she repeats, her voice rising. You think this is good? You think destroying this company is good? I think putting an unsafe device into people's brains is bad. I stand up, meeting her eyes. I think falsifying clinical trial data is bad. I think prioritizing profits over patient safety is bad. So yes, if stopping that means your timeline gets disrupted, then good. You self-righteous, she stops herself, breathing hard. You have no idea what you're talking about. NeuralSync is safe. Those adverse events were properly excluded. Dr. Whitmore's analysis was thorough and scientifically sound. Then you have nothing to worry about. The investigation will clear you. It's not that simple. She's almost shouting now. Even if we're exonerated, the damage is done. The perception is all that matters in this industry. We'll be radioactive. No investor will touch us. No hospital will trust us. Years of work destroyed because you couldn't follow simple instructions. Simple instructions to ignore evidence of data manipulation? There was no manipulation. Then show me Dr. Whitmore's analysis. Right now. Show me the clinical justification for excluding those adverse events. She goes quiet. Too quiet. You can't, I say softly. Because it doesn't exist, does it? There was no proper analysis. Tobias just decided those events didn't fit the narrative you needed, so they disappeared. You don't understand the pressure we're under. I understand perfectly. My voice is steel now. I understand that you were willing to risk people's lives to meet a timeline. I understand that when I tried to do my job, you silenced me. I understand that ethics became expendable the moment they conflicted with profit. Clarissa's face hardens. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. And you can expect legal action for breach of confidentiality, theft of proprietary information, and industrial sabotage. Go ahead. I'm surprised by how calm I sound. File whatever you want. I documented everything. Every conversation. Every file I reviewed. Every warning I raised. I have a paper trail that shows I followed every internal protocol before going external. Your lawyers will have a very interesting time explaining why you reassigned the compliance officer who discovered potential fraud. She stares at me for a long moment. Her jaw works. Her hands clench into fists. For a second, I think she might actually hit me. Then she turns and walks out without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the framed compliance certificates on my wall. I sit back down. My hands are shaking now. Really shaking. The adrenaline that's been holding me together starts to crack, and I feel the tremors running through my arms, my legs, my entire body. I grab the edge of my desk to steady myself. I'm unemployed. Probably unemployable in this industry after Clarissa's lawyers finish with me. I'll be lucky if I can get a job reviewing shipping manifests at a warehouse after this. Lucky if anyone will even return my calls. But I can live with that. What I couldn't live with was staying silent while people got hurt. The investigation takes 3 weeks. 3 weeks of interviews and document reviews and forensic analysis. I meet with Dr. Okonkwo twice, walking her through everything I found. She's thorough, asking questions I haven't even considered, pulling threads I didn't know existed. You did the right thing, she tells me during our second meeting. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. But you did. I want to believe her. The Oversight Committee's preliminary findings are released on a Friday afternoon. I'm sitting in my apartment, the one I'll probably have to leave soon because my savings won't last forever, when the news alert pops up on my phone. Eclipse Technologies investigation reveals systematic data manipulation in clinical trials. FDA submission halted pending further review. My hands go numb reading the details. It's worse than I thought. Much worse. Not just missing adverse events, but fabricated patient outcomes. Endpoint data that was altered to show better efficacy than actually occurred. A conspiracy involving not just Tobias and Dr. Whitmore, but half a dozen other researchers and clinicians. Clarissa was either complicit or willfully blind. Either way, her career is over. The criminal referrals come 2 days later. Federal charges for healthcare fraud. If convicted, people are going to prison. My phone rings constantly. Reporters. Lawyers. Former colleagues. I don't answer most of them. But I do answer when Dr. Okonkwo calls. How are you holding up, she asks. I don't know, I admit. I feel like I should feel vindicated, but mostly I just feel hollow. That's normal. You're grieving what you thought Eclipse Technologies was. What you thought these people were. She's right. I spent 4 years believing we were doing important work. Believing we were one of the good companies. Believing that my colleagues cared about the same things I did. Turns out I was wrong about all of it. There's something else, Dr. Okonkwo says. The patients from the clinical trial. We're reaching out to all of them, offering additional monitoring and care. Some of them want to thank you personally. For making sure their suffering wasn't just erased. My throat tightens. I don't need thanks. Maybe not. But they need to give it. Think about it. I do think about it. 4 days. And eventually I agree to meet with 3 of them. 3 people whose patient codes I memorized during those long nights of document review. They're not codes anymore. They're Helen, a retired teacher with chronic migraines that neural sync was supposed to fix but actually worsened. They're Gabriel, a veteran with PTSD who suffered seizures during the trial that were never properly documented. They're Yuki, a software engineer whose memory problems after the implant were dismissed as unrelated. Real people. Real suffering. Helen holds my hand across the coffee shop table and says, "Thank you for seeing us. For not letting them pretend we didn't matter." I start crying. Can't help it. All the tension and fear and anger of the past month comes pouring out. "I'm sorry," I manage. "I'm so sorry you went through that." "It's not your fault," Gabriel says firmly. "You're the one who stopped it. You're the reason no one else will have to go through what we did." But that's not entirely true, is it? Because I could have acted faster. Could have gone to the oversight committee the moment I found those first discrepancies instead of trying to work through internal channels. Could have saved more people from being harmed. That guilt will stay with me. I know it will. It sits in my chest like a weight that never quite lifts. The lawsuits start rolling in within a month. Patients suing Eclipse Technologies. Investors suing the executives. The FDA launching its own investigation. Clarissa Vale resigns and immediately hires a team of expensive lawyers to argue she was misled by her technical staff. Maybe she was. Maybe she genuinely didn't know how bad things were. But she created the culture that allowed it to happen. She prioritized speed over safety. She silenced dissent. She made ethics optional. That's on her. I testify in 3 different proceedings. Congressional hearing. FDA investigation. Civil litigation. Each time, I tell the same story. Each time, defense attorneys try to paint me as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. Each time, the evidence speaks for itself. Neuralink will never be approved. Eclipse Technologies files for bankruptcy 6 months after the investigation concludes. Hundreds of employees lose their jobs. Investors lose millions. The technology itself, which might have actually helped people if developed properly, is tainted forever. Was it worth it? I ask myself that question every day. When I'm applying for jobs and getting rejected because my name is now associated with the biggest medical device scandal in a decade. When I'm explaining to my family why I can't afford to visit them for the holidays. When I'm lying awake at night wondering if I should have handled things differently. But then I think about Helen and Gabriel and Yuki. I think about all the people who would have received Neuralink implants if the fraud had succeeded. I think about the suffering that was prevented. And I realize that worth isn't measured in career success or financial stability. It's measured in the harm you stop. The people you protect. The principles you refuse to compromise. I did what had to be done. Even if it cost me everything. Even if I'm still paying the price. Dr. Okonkwo helps me find work eventually. A small medical device startup that values integrity over shortcuts. The pay is less than half what I made at Eclipse Technologies. The office is cramped. There's no corner view or expensive furniture. But when the CEO asks me to review their clinical trial documentation, she gives me adequate time. She listens when I raise concerns. She doesn't scoff when I talk about ethics. It's not the career I planned. Not the success story I imagined. But it's honest work with people who understand that some shortcuts aren't worth taking. Some nights I still dream about that moment in Clarissa's office. That choice point where everything could have gone differently. Where I could have backed down, signed off on the documentation, kept my comfortable job and my comfortable life. In those dreams, I sometimes take the easy path. And I wake up feeling sick. Because here's what I've learned, silence has a cost too. Complicity has a price. And living with yourself after you've looked away from harm, that's the heaviest burden of all. I chose to speak up. I chose to act. And yes, it destroyed my career and my financial stability and my reputation in the industry. But I can look at myself in the mirror. I can sleep at night. I can live with the choices I made. Clarissa Vale can't say the same. Neither can Tobias Fletcher or Dr. Whitmore or any of the others who traded people's safety for profit. They'll spend years in legal battles and possibly prison. They'll spend the rest of their lives known as the people who almost got away with medical fraud. Almost. I stopped them. One person with access to the truth and the courage to share it. That's all it took to bring down a billion-dollar company built on lies. Was I too ethical for the shortcuts they needed? Absolutely. And I'd make the same choice again. Every single time. Because some things are more important than success. Some things are more valuable than money. Some things, like the safety of real human beings, like the integrity of medical research, like the basic principle that we don't get to hurt people for profit, are worth fighting for even when the cost is everything you have. The Oversight Committee's intervention didn't just stop neural sync. It sent shockwaves through the entire medical device industry. New regulations. Stricter oversight. Harsher penalties for data manipulation. Companies scrambling to review their own clinical trial practices, terrified of becoming the next Eclipse Technologies. Change built on the rubble of what I destroyed. I tell myself it was worth it. Most days, I believe it. But I'd be lying if I said it doesn't haunt me. The weight of all those lost jobs. The investors who lost their savings. The genuine innovations that died along with the fraud. The collateral damage of doing the right thing. Justice is messy. Whistleblowing isn't heroic. It's ugly and complicated and nobody really wins. But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be willing to sacrifice their comfort and security to stop harm. Somebody has to care more about protecting people than protecting their paycheck.